You stand on a cobbled street in a bustling medieval city. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and refuse, the cacophony of merchants and cartwheels filling your ears. But listen closely beyond the clamor. Can you hear it? A faint, almost imperceptible whisper from the shadows, a story lost to the grand narratives of kings and knights. These are the forgotten voices, the silent children of medieval Europe. You are about to step into their world, a world where the youngest and most vulnerable were often left to fate, where stone walls became a last resort for survival. We will uncover the stark realities of abandonment, the desperate hope of foundling homes, and the quiet struggles that shaped lives often cut tragically short. Join us as we piece together the fragments of their unwritten histories. You stand on this bustling medieval street, the clamor of daily life a constant presence. But peel back the layers of sound, and you begin to hear the fainter echoes, the unheard stories. Among them are the quiet cries of the most vulnerable, the children abandoned to the care of strangers. This was a stark reality of medieval life, a practice driven not always by cruelty, but often by desperation, by the sheer struggle for survival in a world unforgiving of weakness. Imagine yourself in a small, cramped hovel, perhaps on the outskirts of this very city. The air is cold, damp, and the gnawing ache of hunger is a constant companion. You are a parent, perhaps a young mother, widowed or unwed, with another mouth to feed, another tiny body shivering against the harsh realities of winter or famine. You look at your newborn, a small, fragile life, and you know with a certainty that twists your gut that you cannot provide for it. There is no welfare state, no social safety net to catch you. Your options are few and each is a torment. To keep the child is to condemn it to starvation, or to bring down the whole family unit. To abandon it, however unthinkable, might just be its only chance at life. This agonizing choice, repeated untold times across medieval Europe, led to the development of institutions designed, paradoxically, to accept this ultimate act of relinquishment. The Church, guided by Christian charity and the belief in the sanctity of every soul, stepped in where families could not. Foundling hospitals, or ospedali dei trovatelli as they were known in Italy, began to emerge, first in major urban centers like Florence, Siena, and Paris. These were not the sprawling, sterile institutions you might envision today. They were often humble, perhaps a wing of a monastery or a dedicated building close to a church, but their purpose was profound, to offer a desperate hope. Let us walk together towards one such place. You approach a heavy stone wall, perhaps near the entrance of a cathedral or a large charity house. The street here is quieter, the foot traffic less frantic. And then you see it, a small, almost innocuous wooden box built into the wall at waist height. This is the foundling wheel, or rota degli esposti in Italian. It is simple, functional, yet heavy with the weight of untold sorrow and a glimmer of desperate hope. You draw closer. The wheel is a cylinder, open on the side facing the street, and it can be rotated inwards like a lazy Susan, to reveal an opening on the inside of the wall. Picture it with me. The wood is worn smooth by countless desperate touches, perhaps even tears. There is a small bell cord hanging nearby. Now, imagine yourself as that parent, standing before this wheel in the dead of night, shrouded in darkness and anonymity. Your heart pounds in your chest, a drumbeat of despair and resolution. In your arms, you hold your infant, wrapped tightly in a thin cloth, perhaps a token of your love, a small, worn amulet, or a half-coin clutched in its tiny fist, a silent prayer that one day, this child might be recognized, reclaimed. You gently place the baby into the hollow of the wheel. The air is cold against its innocent face. You hesitate, your hand hovering, unable to let go, yet knowing you must. This is not a casual act. This is the severing of a bond, a choice that will haunt you for the rest of your days. You whisper a silent prayer, a blessing, a plea for its survival. Then, with a trembling hand, you give the wheel a gentle push, rotating it inward, away from you, away from the street, into the safe, if anonymous, sanctuary beyond the stone. You hear a soft thud as it settles. Then you pull the bell cord. A faint chime echoes in the silence of the night, a signal to those within. You stand there for a moment, listening, praying, until you hear the soft rustle of movement from inside, a confirmation that the child has been received. Then you turn and melt back into the shadows, a ghost of a parent, carrying an unbearable emptiness. This ritual, repeated thousands upon thousands of times across the centuries, provided a crucial, if heartbreaking, safety valve for medieval society. The reasons for abandonment were manifold and deeply intertwined with the harsh realities of the age. Extreme poverty was paramount. Famine, war, and plague could devastate families overnight, leaving survivors with no means to support additional children. Illegitimacy carried immense social stigma, particularly for women. A child born out of wedlock often faced a life of ostracization, and the mother, if discovered, could face ruin. Abandonment offered a way to preserve honor, however painful the cost. Disease also played a role. Parents suffering from chronic illness or those fearing their own imminent death might abandon their children in the hope they would receive better care and a chance at a healthier life. Sometimes parents themselves were too sick to care for an infant. Other children were left due to disabilities or deformities, which in a superstitious age could be seen as a curse or an ill omen, leading to fear and rejection. Even the death of a mother in childbirth could leave a father overwhelmed and unable to care for a newborn, particularly if he had other children to tend to and no extended family support. Once the child was received by the institution, a new, often precarious, journey began. The bell's chime would alert the sisters or caregivers within. They would rotate the wheel back, collect the infant, and bring it into the warmth and relative safety of the foundling home. The first task was often to examine the child for any identifying marks or tokens. Parents, in their desperate hope of future recognition, sometimes left small objects: a piece of cloth, a coin broken in half, a religious medal, a coded message on parchment, a uniquely carved wooden charm. These tokens were carefully catalogued and stored, sometimes pinned directly to the child's swaddling clothes, serving as the sole link to their biological past. The immediate care focused on basic survival. Most infants, particularly newborns, could not be fed directly by the sisters. The institution would contract out wet nurses, women from the surrounding community who had recently given birth themselves and could breastfeed the foundlings. This practice, while essential for infant survival, also carried risks. The quality of wet nurses varied, and children were often sent far from the city into rural areas where oversight was difficult. Mortality rates among foundlings were tragically high. Records from the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, one of the most famous and well-documented foundling hospitals, reveal that in some periods, more than half of the children died within their first year. Disease, malnutrition, and the sheer challenge of caring for hundreds of infants with limited resources took a heavy toll. For those who survived infancy, life within the foundling home continued. They were given a new name, often reflecting their abandonment or the institution itself, like Innocenti or Esposito, meaning exposed. They were raised within the confines of the institution, taught basic literacy, religious instruction, and practical skills. The boys might learn a trade like weaving, carpentry, or masonry, preparing them for apprenticeships in the city. The girls were often trained in domestic arts, sewing, cooking, cleaning, destined for roles as servants, laundresses, or, if fortunate, as wives to artisans. The goal was to integrate these children into society, to give them a path to self-sufficiency. However, the stigma of being a foundling often lingered. They carried the unspoken burden of their origins, sometimes facing discrimination or a lack of opportunities that might be available to those born into established families. For many, the foundling home was not a forever home, but a stepping stone, a temporary haven before they were sent out into the world, often at a young age, to earn their keep. Yet, despite the harsh realities and high mortality, These institutions represented a profound act of medieval charity and a testament to the enduring human desire to protect even the most marginalized. They offered a lifeline, however slender, to countless children who would otherwise have perished. They were a place of last resort, a cradle of both desperate relinquishment and faint hope. You can almost feel the chill of the stone, the soft brush of worn wood, the silent prayers of mothers and the first tenuous breaths of newborns, all connected by this simple yet powerful machine of mercy and sorrow. These silent children, though often nameless in the grand sweep of history, leave their imprint on the very fabric of medieval society, a poignant reminder of lives lived on the margins, fighting for a chance. We will continue to uncover their stories, following their difficult paths from the foundling wheel into the broader medieval world. From the foundling wheel, that revolving cradle of desperate hope, the path for many silent children led directly into the stone embrace of the church. You stepped through the heavy wooden doors, feeling the immediate drop in temperature, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and old incense, a stark contrast to the often brutal world outside. Here, within the hallowed walls of abbeys, convents, and purpose-built hospitals, the church undertook a monumental, often overwhelming responsibility: the care of the abandoned and the orphaned. This was not merely an act of kindness, it was a deep theological imperative. You can almost hear the faint echo of a sermon, a priest speaking of the sacred duty to protect the innocent, to offer succor to the least among them. Medieval Christian teaching held that all life was precious, a gift from God. The abandonment of children, particularly the practice of infanticide, which was a dark undercurrent of the era, was a profound sin. By taking in foundlings, the Church sought to prevent such atrocities, to save souls, and to uphold the very tenets of Christian charity. You perceive the unwavering conviction, the heavy moral weight that rested upon the shoulders of abbots, abbesses, and bishops. They believed they were literally doing God's work, providing a sanctuary where lives could be preserved and souls nurtured. Imagine you are standing at the entrance to a medieval foundling house, perhaps attached to a large monastery or a cathedral. The sounds are hushed, yet not entirely silent. You hear the distant murmur of chanting from the main church, punctuated by the soft cries of infants, sometimes a cough, or the shuffle of sandals on cold flagstones. When a child arrived, often wrapped in tattered cloth and sometimes bearing a small token of identity from a desperate mother, a coin, a piece of jewelry, a half-broken amulet, the first order of business was to ensure their spiritual safety. If not already baptized, this ritual would be performed swiftly, ensuring the child's soul was not lost should they succumb to the prevalent illnesses of infancy. You witnessed the solemnity of the moment, the blessing of a tiny, unknown life. Naming was another crucial step. Lacking a family name, these children were often given names reflective of their place of arrival: Innocenti, Deodatus or Diodata, meaning God-given, or even names of saints whose feast days coincided with their discovery. You hear these names whispered by the nuns and monks, each one a small attempt to restore a shred of identity to a child who had been stripped of everything else. This naming was not merely administrative, it was an act of recognition, a humble acknowledgement of their existence in the eyes of God and community, however tenuous. The resources for these institutions were always stretched thin. You see the constant balancing act of the Church, relying heavily on charitable donations from wealthy patrons, bequests from the dying, and the diligent collection of alms. Sometimes even the regular tithes, a tenth of all agricultural produce or earnings, had to be carefully managed to support the growing number of mouths to feed and bodies to clothe. You feel the strain, the perpetual need for more, as each season brought new arrivals, new cries echoing through the stone corridors. The sisters and brothers who administered these houses lived frugal lives themselves, their dedication a testament to their vows. Daily life within these church-run sanctuaries was arduous, especially for the very young. You walk through a long hall, perhaps lined with rows of rough wooden cribs or pallets on the floor. The air is often cool and damp. The overwhelming challenge was infant mortality. Even under the best medieval care, countless newborns and toddlers succumbed to disease, malnourishment, and the simple fragility of life in an age before modern medicine. Wet nurses were employed whenever possible, often peasant women from nearby villages, who would come to suckle the infants. You hear the gentle cooing, the soft sounds of feeding, mixed with the ever-present anxiety of impending loss. For those who survived infancy, the routines became more structured. As children grew, their days were filled with a mixture of religious instruction, practical chores, and rudimentary education. You might observe a group of children, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, gathered around an elderly monk, learning the Pater Noster, the Our Father, or the Ave Maria. Their voices are thin and reedy as they repeat the Latin phrases. They learned basic literacy, often just enough to read prayers, and received moral teachings rooted deeply in Christian doctrine. Discipline, while firm, was often tempered by the understanding of their vulnerable origins. Practical skills were paramount for their future. You see the older boys being taught simple trades within the monastery walls: carpentry, gardening, animal husbandry, perhaps even assisting in the scriptorium with basic copying tasks. Girls would learn domestic arts: spinning wool, weaving, cooking, cleaning, mending garments, and assisting in the care of younger children. These skills were not merely tasks. They were their future, their slim hope of integrating into medieval society as self-sufficient adults. You sensed the urgency in their learning, the silent understanding that their survival depended on their usefulness. The very atmosphere was one of disciplined charity. While devoid of the intimate love of a natural family, there was a profound sense of communal belonging and care. You hear the communal prayers at dawn, at noon, and at vespers, uniting the children with their monastic guardians. You feel the rhythm of a life governed by the church bells, a cycle of work, prayer, and rest. Yet, despite the efforts, the path out of the orphanage was often challenging. For many, adulthood meant a life of service. For boys, perhaps as a laborer, a soldier, or even an entry into minor ecclesiastical orders. For girls, domestic service, marriage if they were fortunate, or sometimes even a life within the convent that had raised them. Their prospects were limited, their origins a lifelong mark. The church, in its profound commitment, carried a heavy burden. You can almost feel the sheer weight of responsibility, the constant need to balance limited resources with an endless stream of need. These institutions were not perfect. They reflected the limitations and harsh realities of their time. But they were, undeniably, a radical act of mercy in an often unmerciful world. You stand in these silent spaces, surrounded by the echoes of countless small lives, understanding that these sanctuaries, despite their austerity and the sorrow they contained, offered the only hope for survival and a chance at a life for medieval society's most vulnerable. You are not merely observing now. You are here. You feel the deep, penetrating chill that seeps from the ancient stone walls, a cold that seems to cling to your very bones. It is not yet dawn, but a distant, mournful bell has already sliced through the pre-dawn silence, a calloused hand shaking you awake from a fitful sleep on a thin, straw-filled mattress. The air is heavy with the mingled sense of damp earth, stale wood smoke, and too many unwashed bodies huddled together in the dimness of the common dormitory. You push yourself up, your joints aching, your stomach a hollow knot of hunger that has been your constant companion since you arrived here as a tiny, swaddled bundle, left on the turning cradle at the convent gate. Around you, other children stir, their movements slow and reluctant. There are dozens of you, maybe even hundreds depending on the size of the institution. Small, hushed coughs echo from the rows of narrow beds. The light that filters in through the tiny high-set windows is not from the sun, but from a lantern carried by a stern-faced sister or a grizzled lay brother, who moves silently among the sleeping forms, ensuring everyone rises. Dressing is a swift, cold affair. Your clothes are simple, rough-spun linen or coarse wool, often mended many times over, scratchy against your skin. They are uniform, indistinguishable from those worn by any other child here, a practical necessity in a world of limited resources, but also a subtle reminder of your shared, anonymous fate. There is no time for vanity, no personal possessions beyond a small wooden cross or perhaps a smooth stone found in the yard. Your fingers are clumsy with the cold as you fasten the few buttons, your breath pluming in the frigid air. A quick wash, if it can be called that, involves a splash of icy water from a communal basin, a hurried rub with a stiff cloth. You shiver, the cold biting at your face and hands, but you know better than to complain. Discipline here is absolute, not out of cruelty but out of necessity. Order is the very fabric that holds this precarious world together, a shield against chaos and despair. Then comes the call to morning prayers. You join the procession of silent, shuffling feet, moving from the dormitory to the chapel. The stone floor is numbingly cold beneath your worn sandals or bare feet. In the chapel the air is even colder, smelling of old incense and beeswax. You kneel on the hard flagstones, your knees protesting, your mind still sluggish with sleep and hunger. The voices of the sisters or brothers rise in plainsong, a drone of Latin words that you repeat by rote, perhaps understanding only fragments, but knowing the reverence required. For a few moments, the rhythmic chanting fills the emptiness within you, a temporary balm. After prayers, the most anticipated and often most disappointing part of the day, breakfast. You line up at the refectory, the large communal dining hall. The fare is almost always the same. A thin, watery gruel, perhaps made from oats or barley, served in a wooden bowl. Sometimes, if the harvest has been good or a benefactor generous, there might be a small chunk of dark, hard bread. You eat quickly, silently, your eyes fixed on your bowl, acutely aware of every mouthful, knowing that this meager offering must sustain you for hours. There is no second helping. There are no choices. Hunger is a constant, gnawing presence, a low thrum beneath all other sensations. With the first meal done, the day's labor begins. For the younger children, under the age of 7 or 8, tasks are simple. You might be set to sweeping the stone floors with a rough broom, carrying small buckets of water from the well, or gathering scraps of kindling for the kitchen fires. You learn quickly to be quiet, to be efficient, to not get in the way. As you grow older, your tasks become more specific, often depending on your gender, though this is not always rigid. If you are a girl, you might spend your mornings in the sewing room, learning to mend torn garments with nimble fingers, to spin raw wool into thread on a simple drop spindle, or to weave on a small loom. You might assist in the laundry, scrubbing heavy fabrics in cold water, or in the kitchen, helping to chop vegetables for the midday pottage, stirring vast cauldrons, or kneading dough for the daily bread. These are vital skills, practical training for the life of service that likely awaits you outside these walls. If you are a boy, your work might take you into the garden, tending to the monastery's small plot of vegetables and herbs, pulling weeds or digging furrows. You might assist the lay brothers with carpentry, learning to plane wood or hammer nails, or help tend to the few livestock the institution might possess. A cow for milk, a handful of chickens for eggs, pigs for meat. Perhaps you help carry heavy sacks of grain, mend fences, or assist in the scriptorium, if you are lucky enough to show a particular aptitude and the institution has the resources to teach you the basics of copying texts. Every hand is needed, every task contributes to the survival of the collective. Formal education is a luxury, offered only to a select few. Most of you learn through observation and repetition. However, religious instruction is universal. You spend time each day learning catechism, memorizing more prayers, listening to stories from the Bible, and practicing simple hymns. A sister or brother guides these lessons, often with a stern but patient demeanor. You learn about sin and salvation, about the lives of saints, about your place in God's ordered world. This spiritual sustenance is considered as vital, if not more so, than the meager physical food. The midday meal is often a repetition of breakfast, perhaps a thicker pottage or a very weak vegetable broth, with more hard bread. Again, silence reigns, punctuated only by the clatter of wooden spoons against bowls. Eating is not a pleasure but a necessity, a refueling for the work ahead. The afternoon mirrors the morning schedule of work and religious lessons. There is little time for what you might call play in the modern sense. Moments of recreation are sparse and simple. Perhaps during a brief lull in chores, you might gather a handful of pebbles and play a quiet game in the courtyard, or listen to an older child tell a hushed story. Laughter is rare, quickly stifled, a precious and fleeting sound. The stern gaze of a supervisor is always present, a constant reminder of your duties. Yet, in these stolen moments, a fierce camaraderie can form, a silent bond between those who share this difficult existence. You learn to rely on one another to find small comforts in shared hardship. As the afternoon light begins to fade, painting the gray stone walls with a brief, warm glow, the day's manual labor draws to a close. There is a final period of evening prayers, vespers, a quiet reflection as the darkness deepens. Then comes the evening meal, often the smallest of the day. A piece of stale bread, a last taste of gruel, perhaps a small measure of weak ale if the home is prosperous. The cold returns with a vengeance as night falls, and you are eager for the warmth, however slight, of your shared mattress. Before you finally lie down, you take part in Compline, the final prayers of the day, a quiet petition for protection through the night. You crawl back onto your straw bed, pulling the rough blanket up to your chin, listening to the soft breathing of the other children around you. The dormitory grows quiet, save for the occasional sigh or shifting weight. You close your eyes, the day's exhaustion heavy upon you, and for a few precious hours, the gnawing hunger is forgotten in the depths of sleep. This is the rhythm of your life, day after day, season after season. A life of rigorous discipline, of constant work, of simple fare. It is a harsh existence, undeniably. But as you drift to sleep, you know deep in your small, tired heart, that these stone walls, however cold, however austere, are also a sanctuary. They are the only home you have ever known, a place that, despite its privations, has offered you the fundamental gifts of survival and a chance at tomorrow in a world that might otherwise have simply let you perish. But even within the sanctuary of these thick stone walls, a different kind of shadow looms, one far more insidious than hunger or cold. It is a shadow that whispers on the breath of a cough, that burns in the flush of a fever, that steals silently through the dormitories and plays a grim game of chance with every young life it touches. This is the silent, pervasive threat of disease, the ever-present reaper that stalks the narrow alleys and crowded rooms of your medieval world, and nowhere does it reap a more sorrowful harvest than among the most vulnerable, the children of the orphanage. You have seen its work. You have heard the ragged breaths, the whimpering cries in the night that slowly, terribly fade to silence. You have watched the small, pale faces of your companions grow thinner, their eyes dulled, their bodies racked by invisible tormentors. In a time when the very concept of germs is utterly unknown, when illness is often attributed to imbalances of humors, divine displeasure, or even malevolent spirits, prevention is a mystery and cures are often little more than desperate prayers or folk remedies. The air you breathe here, though better than the open sewers of the city, is still often thick and stale. Ventilation is poor in the large sleeping quarters, designed more for warmth than for the free flow of fresh air. You sleep packed together, sometimes 2 or 3 to a straw mattress, a necessity in an institution housing so many young souls. This closeness, meant to foster companionship and share what little warmth is available, becomes instead an unwitting accomplice to the spread of contagion. A sneeze, a cough, a shared bowl of gruel, a hand reaching for a plaything that another child has touched, each innocuous act can become a conduit for illness. Consider the simple act of drinking water. The well in the courtyard, or the river from which water is drawn, serves many purposes. It is where clothes are washed, where food is prepared, and where bodies are occasionally cleaned. Animal waste, human waste, and all manner of refuse can find their way into these vital sources, unseen. A child's stomach, already weakened by a diet that is sufficient for basic survival but often lacking in essential nutrients, is fertile ground for the devastating effects of contaminated water. The terrible grip of dysentery with its debilitating cramps and relentless flux is a familiar terror. It can empty a child of all strength and life within days, leaving them a shrunken, wasted shell. Then there is the persistent, gnawing hunger that you know so well. While you are fed, the meals are frugal, designed for sustenance, not abundance. A steady diet of weak gruel, stale bread, and perhaps a small ration of beans or dried fish, though keeping starvation at bay, does not build robust immune systems. Your small body, constantly working, constantly growing, is always on the defensive, always drawing on limited reserves. When illness strikes, there is little left to fight with. The body, already depleted, succumbs more readily. You remember Sister Agnes, her face etched with concern, moving among the beds, pressing cool cloths to fevered brows, murmuring prayers. She knows little of medicine beyond simple poultices of herbs gathered from the garden, or perhaps a bitter decoction to ease a cough. The understanding of sanitation is rudimentary. Hands are washed, but not with the rigorous attention we now understand is vital. Clothing is laundered, but perhaps not as frequently or thoroughly as needed. The straw of your mattress, though periodically replaced, harbors unseen creatures and the lingering essences of previous occupants. The diseases that sweep through the orphanage are a relentless tide. Measles, once a common childhood ailment that today is mostly a nuisance, was a killer in your time. It would leave children blind, deaf, or simply claim their lives outright. Mumps, scarlet fever, whooping cough, each carried the potential for severe complications and death. Respiratory infections are particularly cruel in these cold stone buildings. A persistent cough can quickly escalate into a burning fever and difficulty breathing, the telltale signs of pneumonia, which can extinguish a life with shocking speed. You might see a child struggle for days, their chest heaving, until their breath finally gives out. And then there is consumption, the wasting disease, tuberculosis. It is a slow, insidious thief. You might see a child, perhaps a year or two older than you, begin to cough lightly, a dry, persistent tickle at first. Then the cough deepens, becomes wetter, and a telltale flush appears on their cheeks, not of health, but of fever. They grow weaker, their appetite dwindles, and their thin frame grows thinner still. The disease eats away at their lungs, slowly consuming them from the inside out, until one day they are simply gone. This is a common fate, a shadow that falls over many years, stealing away youths one by one. But the most heartbreaking harvest, the most silent disappearances, are those of the infants. The little ones, often left on the steps of the orphanage, swaddled bundles of hope and vulnerability, face the harshest odds. Infant mortality in the medieval period is staggering, a fact of life that would horrify modern sensibilities. Perhaps 1 in 4 children, sometimes even 1 in 3, would not live to see their first birthday. For foundlings, those odds are often even grim. You have heard the stories of the new arrivals, tiny bundles brought in by a sympathetic villager or a repentant mother. The sisters, especially Sister Maria, who has a special tenderness for the smallest ones, would do their best. But the challenges are immense. Without a mother's natural milk, infants rely on wet nurses, women who breastfeed other women's babies. If a wet nurse is not available, or if she herself is unwell or has insufficient milk, the prospects for the infant plummet. Animal milk is often difficult for tiny stomachs to digest, leading to malnourishment and susceptibility to every passing infection. You might see one of these tiny infants, a new face among the many, for only a few days or weeks. Their cries might be weak, their skin too pale. They would lie listlessly in their small cradles, attended to by the sisters. Then one morning the cradle would be empty. No explanation, no ceremony, just a silent absence. A tiny life, barely begun, extinguished by the brutal realities of the age. This is not seen as a tragedy in the way we understand it today, but rather as an unfortunate, almost inevitable part of existence. It is simply the way of things. The child was weak, the child was not meant to thrive. God's will. You remember a particularly cold winter. The coughs seemed to echo through the dormitory night after night. You yourself felt the burning in your chest, the ache in your bones, the sudden weakness that made even lifting a bowl of gruel an effort. You huddled deeper into your straw, trying to draw warmth from your companions, hoping the fever would pass. You remember the taste of a bitter herbal tea Sister Agnes pressed to your lips, and the clammy feel of her hand on your forehead. You were lucky. You rallied. Many did not. You have stood with the other children, heads bowed, as a small, simple wooden coffin, often no more than a crude box, is carried out. Sometimes it is one of the infants, so small it seems impossible for a life to have ended. Other times, it is a slightly older child, a familiar face from your lessons or your chores. The burial ground near the orphanage is dotted with these small, anonymous mounds. No elaborate headstones, no grand inscriptions, just the earth claiming its due. The orphanage, for all its efforts to provide sanctuary, is also a place where death is a constant, quiet companion. It is a place where lives begin in desperation and often end in silence. The children who survive, like you, carry within them the unspoken knowledge of those who did not. You learn not to grow too attached, not to expect permanence. You learn to observe the subtle signs of illness in others and in yourself, and to understand that survival is a daily triumph, a constant defiance of the myriad threats that constantly swirl around you. The air might carry the faint, sweet scent of burning herbs, a futile attempt to purify the unseen miasma that the medieval mind believes carries disease. You might hear the low drone of prayers for the sick, the Latin words a comforting but ultimately powerless shield against the onslaught. In this world, every cough, every fever, every unexplained weakness is a potential harbinger of the end. And so, as you lie in the dormitory, listening to the soft breathing of the children around you, you are keenly aware of the fragility of life. You are a survivor day by day. You have escaped the grim reaper's harvest more times than you can count. The hunger and cold are hardships, yes, but the silent creeping shadow of disease is the true terror. It is the adversary that can steal your tomorrow, regardless of your strength or your will. And as you finally drift to sleep, you send a silent, unconscious prayer into the dark for another day of breath, another day of life, in a world where childhood is a perilous journey, and survival itself is a testament to an almost miraculous resilience. You have survived another night, another cycle of breath in the cold, cavernous dormitory. You are a testament to an almost miraculous resilience. But who tends the flame of that resilience when it flickers low? Who stands guard against the ever-present shadows of hunger and sickness? As the first sliver of gray light begins to trace the edges of the narrow window, long before the first sleepy stirrings of the children, another presence begins its quiet vigil. These are the hands that have held countless small forms, the shoulders that have absorbed an ocean of tears, the hearts that have witnessed both the heartbreaking fragility and the stubborn will to live that define childhood in this unforgiving age. You are no longer just a child within these walls. Now you are the caregiver. You rise from a straw pallet that offers little comfort, your bones aching from the damp chill that permeates every stone of this ancient building. Your habit, rough wool against your skin, is a constant reminder of your chosen path, a path of service and sacrifice. The air is heavy with the scent of stale straw, wood smoke from the hearth you must soon rekindle, and a faint, pervasive odor that speaks of sickness and the many unwashed bodies sleeping soundly around you. You move with a practiced silence, your footsteps muffled by the worn flagstones, careful not to disturb the fragile peace of the sleeping children, each one a precious, vulnerable life entrusted to your weary hands. Your day begins long before the sun dares to fully breach the horizon. The first task is often prayer, a silent communion in the cold chapel, your whispered words rising like thin smoke in the frigid air. You pray for strength, for guidance, for the souls of the children under your care, and for the souls of those who have already departed. Then the practical work begins. You descend to the scullery, where the water is drawn from a well that tastes of earth and stone, where the meager rations of gruel or thin broth are prepared over a sputtering fire. Your fingers, calloused and chapped from endless scrubbing in cold water, work with an efficient rhythm. There is no time for hesitation, no room for sentimentality in the sheer volume of tasks that await you before the day has even properly begun. As the children awaken, a ripple of quiet coughs and murmurs spreading through the dormitory, you are there. You help the smallest ones dress, their tiny limbs stiff with sleep and cold. You guide them to the privy, a drafty, unpleasant place that nonetheless demands constant attention to keep disease at bay. You watch as they eat their meager breakfast, encouraging the finicky, gently coaxing the weak, and always keeping an eye out for the telltale signs of a new fever, a spreading rash, a labored breath. Every cough, every pallor, every moment of listlessness is a data point in your constant, internal assessment of the fragile health of your small charges. The day unfolds as a ceaseless cycle of chores, punctuated by moments of desperate medical care. You teach the older children their letters, recite scripture, and instruct them in simple chores like mending torn clothes or preparing vegetables. You are teacher, nurse, disciplinarian, and confessor. Most profoundly, you are surrogate parent to dozens of children who have known little warmth or security in their short lives. Your compassion must be tempered by the harsh realities of your limited resources. You have no soft blankets for every child, no rich foods to tempt failing appetites, and certainly no miracle cures for the rampant illnesses that sweep through the orphanage with terrifying regularity. You apply what remedies you know: herbal poultices for sores, a warm compress for a fevered brow, comforting words whispered over a child shivering with ague. You understand that much of your medical arsenal is more about comfort and faith than actual healing. You have witnessed the grim procession of the plague, the silent epidemic of dysentery, the swift, merciless grip of pneumonia. You have watched life drain from young faces you have come to love, despite your vows of detachment. You have closed the eyes of children who look to you as their last hope, their final glimpse of kindness in a harsh world. Each death is a small wound to your soul, a silent ache that you carry with you, hidden beneath your stoic demeanor. These children are society's unwanted, abandoned, or orphaned by plague, war, or poverty. They are the ones who would perish without the often unseen work performed within these charitable institutions. You are part of a silent army, dedicated to preventing these vulnerable lives from simply vanishing. Your motivations are complex: a fervent religious devotion, a deeply ingrained sense of Christian charity, and undoubtedly, a profound human empathy that transcends doctrine. You believe that by serving these least among us, you are serving God directly, earning a measure of grace in a world where salvation feels as precarious as the lives of the children you tend. Your days are long, stretching from pre-dawn until deep into the night, often broken by a child's cries or the urgent need of a sick ward. Your nights are not always restful. The sounds of the dormitory, the whimpers, the labored breathing, the sudden nightmares pull you from sleep. You walk the rows of pallets, a silent sentinel, checking on each small form, tucking in a blanket, offering a whispered prayer. You are constantly aware of the precious, fragile thread of life that binds each child to this world, and how easily that thread can snap. The struggle is not just against disease and hunger, but also against despair. It is easy to become overwhelmed by the sheer scale of suffering, by the relentless nature of the work, by the constant stream of new needy faces arriving at your door. You find solace in the small victories: a child's fever breaking, a shy smile, a successful attempt at reading a psalm. These fleeting moments of joy are the fuel that sustains your spirit, the proof that your tireless efforts are not entirely in vain. Yet your struggle is largely unseen, uncelebrated. There are no grand parades for the caregivers of the orphaned, no ballads sung of your tireless devotion. Your reward is not worldly recognition, but rather the quiet satisfaction of a duty performed, a life offered in service, and the hope of a spiritual recompense in the next life. You are the unseen backbone of medieval charity, the hands that hold, the hearts that ache, the silent strength that allows these fragile children a chance, however slim, at survival. You carry the weight of their futures, their fragile present, and their often tragic pasts. The tears you shed are few and private, reserved for the quiet solitude of the chapel or the darkness of your own cell. The exhaustion you feel is a constant companion, a deep weariness that settles into your bones. But still you rise each day. Still you tend to the fires, still you prepare the gruel, still you offer a steady hand and a comforting voice. Still, you fight the silent, relentless battle against the overwhelming forces of a harsh medieval world. You are a guardian, a protector, a beacon of hope in the shadows, and in this, your silent struggle is perhaps the most profound testament to humanity's enduring capacity for compassion. You have guarded these children, nourished them, and perhaps, for a fleeting time, even allowed them to forget the circumstances that brought them to your door. You have been their world, a sheltered haven against the howling winds of an indifferent age. But now, as they grow older, as the first tendrils of adolescence begin to stretch their young limbs, a new and formidable challenge looms on the horizon. A challenge that even your boundless compassion cannot fully shield them from. It is the invisible mark, the indelible brand of the orphan, etched not on their skin, but upon their very being, shaping their destiny in ways both subtle and profound. You see it in their eyes sometimes, a flicker of apprehension when a stranger glances their way, a quiet understanding of their own precarious place in the vast, unforgiving tapestry of medieval society. You live in a world where identity is paramount, where your name, your family, your lineage dictates almost everything. It determines your social standing, your inheritance, your prospects for marriage, and even the clothes upon your back. To be without these anchors, to be an orphan, is to be adrift, a ship without a rudder in a storm-tossed sea. Imagine for a moment, stepping out from the familiar, if austere, walls of the orphanage. You are no longer one of many, bound by shared circumstance. Instead, you are an individual, thrust into a bustling street, where every face you meet carries the weight of generations, a proud family name, a history stretching back through time. You, however, carry a void. Your family is a mystery, perhaps even a source of shame. Who were your parents? Were you left on the steps because they were too poor, too ill, too desperate? Or was there some darker secret, a stain on your birth that society implicitly judges? This unspoken question hangs in the air around you, a silent judgment from those who have known nothing but the security of a family name. You are an orphan, a child of charity, a recipient of the Church's mercy. While this mercy is commendable, it often comes with a subtle yet pervasive undercurrent of stigma. You are not simply a person. You are an orphan, an identity that precedes all others. Consider the practicalities. As you reach an age where you might seek a trade, an apprenticeship, or a position in a noble household, the first questions asked would be about your family. Who vouches for you? What is your lineage? Where do you come from? When you answer, I am from the orphanage, a certain door immediately closes. The master craftsman might hesitate, preferring a boy or girl with connections, with a family name that offers a guarantee of character, or at least a known background. You are an unknown quantity, a potential risk. Marriage, that fundamental building block of medieval society, becomes an enormous hurdle. For a young woman from the orphanage, a good marriage is a near impossibility. Without a dowry, without a family to negotiate on her behalf, without a respected name to lend credibility, her options are painfully limited. She might find herself relegated to service, her dreams of a family of her own fading with each passing year. For a young man, the struggle is similar. He cannot inherit land, he cannot boast of a prestigious ancestry, and finding a bride from a reputable family is exceedingly difficult. He is often seen as a poor match, without the social or economic capital to secure a stable future for a family. You learn to navigate this world of subtle prejudice and closed doors. You develop a keen awareness of your status, a heightened sensitivity to the way others perceive you. You might try to invent a past, to borrow a surname, to weave a story that makes you seem more rooted, more conventional. But the truth or the lack thereof always lingers. You carry the weight of this uncertainty, this fundamental missing piece of yourself, through every interaction. The very word orphan itself in many medieval tongues carried connotations of vulnerability, misfortune, and even a degree of social inferiority. It was a label that, once applied, was difficult to shed. You might be hardworking, honest, and skilled, but still, in the eyes of many, you would remain the orphan. Your achievements would be remarkable for an orphan, rather than simply remarkable. This constant qualification, this asterisk next to your very existence, gnaws at the spirit. You witness the children you have nurtured preparing to face this daunting reality. You teach them not just skills for survival but also resilience, fortitude, and a deep sense of self-worth that you hope can counteract the societal judgments. You tell them they are beloved by God, that their worth is not determined by earthly lineage. But you know in your heart that the world outside your walls is often less forgiving than the divine. This social stigma, this branded fate, was not merely a matter of snobbery, it had profound economic and existential consequences. It dictated access to resources, to education, to opportunities for advancement. It could condemn an individual to a life of perpetual servitude, or even destitution, despite their best efforts. You see the children, full of nascent hope and youthful energy, but you also see the heavy chains of expectation and prejudice that await them. Even the most charitable individuals, those who might offer you a position, would likely do so with a paternalistic air, viewing you as an object of pity rather than an equal. You might be grateful for the roof over your head and the food in your belly, but you would always be aware of the invisible barrier between yourself and those with established roots. You yearn to erase this mark, to grant these children the same unburdened start as any other child. But you cannot. The structures of medieval society are too rigid, too steeped in tradition and hierarchy. All you can do is equip them with the tools to endure, to fight for their place, and to find strength within themselves. You instill in them the values of hard work, piety, and perseverance, hoping these virtues will serve as their own kind of noble lineage, their own unspoken claim to respect. You see a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, meticulously mending a piece of cloth, her brow furrowed in concentration. She has a talent for needlework, a nimble hand. You can imagine her one day working as a seamstress, perhaps even establishing her own small business. But then the questions flood in. Who would trust her to handle their valuable fabrics without a family to vouch for her honesty? Who would allow her to set up shop without a male relative to oversee her affairs? The path is not merely difficult, it is fraught with unseen obstacles, born purely from her status as an orphan. And the boys? You teach them basic literacy, numbers, and useful trades like carpentry or farming. You send them out with a prayer and a recommendation letter, hoping it will be enough. But you know that without a family inheritance, without land, without a craft passed down from father to son, their ascent will be arduous. They are starting from less than zero, carrying the negative weight of their unknown origins. The shame associated with being an orphan could be internalized, leading to feelings of worthlessness or a desperate need to prove oneself. You see this manifest in different ways. In some, a quiet resignation. In others, a fierce, almost desperate drive for achievement. In still others, a withdrawal, a belief that they are somehow fundamentally flawed. You understand that this is not merely a social problem. It is a deep, personal struggle for identity and acceptance. So, as you continue your tireless work, caring for the new arrivals, teaching the older ones, you are always acutely aware of the world that awaits them. A world that judges by bloodline, by surname, by the visible connections that you, their temporary guardian, cannot provide. You are a bridge, leading them from infancy to an uncertain adulthood, but that bridge ends abruptly at the threshold of a society often unwilling to embrace them fully. You carry this knowledge, this burden, as you move through your days. You offer words of encouragement, you share stories of resilience, you teach them practical skills, all while knowing that the greatest battle they will face is not against hunger or cold, but against the silent, pervasive judgment of their fellow human beings. A judgment that brands them through no fault of their own, with the indelible mark of the orphan. This is the fate you strive to mitigate, the future you fight to illuminate with the flickering, fragile lamp of your enduring compassion. You stand at the threshold of their uncertain future, the weight of a medieval society's expectations pressing down upon you, just as it presses upon the small shoulders of the children in your care. Your compassion, that flickering lamp, illuminates not a wide-open vista of possibility, but rather two distinct, often narrow paths, determined almost entirely by the simple fact of whether a child is born a boy or a girl. This is the gendered destiny of the silent children, a fate you must help them navigate, knowing that their birth into anonymity has already cast the die. Look around you now at the older children. See the boys, perhaps 7 or 8 years of age, their youthful energy barely contained. They are learning to mend nets, to haul sacks of grain, to carve simple wooden figures. Their small hands, though still clumsy, are beginning to gain the rough competence that will define their adult lives. You watch them and you see the future tradesmen, the laborers, the men of service. Their path, while arduous, is one of physical contribution and skill acquisition. For the boys, the goal is often an apprenticeship. You strive to find them a master, a craftsman who will take them in, teach them a trade, and provide them with food and lodging in exchange for their labor. Imagine the negotiations. You speak with the baker, his hands dusted with flour, the smell of yeast clinging to his garments. You speak with the cobbler, surrounded by the scent of leather and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of his hammer. You visit the blacksmith, the air thick with the smell of coal smoke and the clang of metal on metal, seeking a place where a strong lad might learn to bend iron to his will. You weigh the character of the master, the fairness of the terms. Will the boy be fed? Will he be taught properly or merely used as a beast of burden? Will he be treated with a measure of kindness, or will he endure the harsh discipline common to many medieval workshops? These are your daily concerns, as you try to secure a future that offers at least a glimmer of self-sufficiency. A boy who masters a trade might one day establish his own shop, become a contributing member of a guild, and earn his own living. This is the highest aspiration for many of your male charges, a quiet dignity born of skill and honest work. You impress upon them the virtues of hard work, obedience, and diligence. You teach them rudimentary arithmetic, enough to handle basic transactions. You instill in them the importance of honesty, knowing that their reputation will be their most valuable asset in a world where family connections are absent. You tell them stories of successful apprentices, of men who started with nothing and built a life through sheer effort and skill. These stories are not always common, but they are vital, offering a small beacon of hope in a vast sea of uncertainty. The reality, however, can be grim. Apprenticeships are often grueling. A boy might face long hours, meager food, and harsh punishments. He might be exploited, his skills never truly developed, leaving him destined for a life of unskilled labor. You know that not every boy will succeed, that some will struggle, and that others might vanish into the anonymity from which they came, unable to carve out a place for themselves. But you try tirelessly to give them the best possible start, to equip them with the tools, both practical and moral, to face their world. Now turn your gaze to the girls. Their path is altogether different, shaped by a society that valued their domestic skills and their potential for marriage above all else. For the girls, perhaps even more acutely than for the boys, the absence of family is a profound handicap. A respectable marriage, the cornerstone of a woman's social standing and economic security, is almost impossible without a dowry and family connections to arrange it. You teach the girls the intricate dance of domestic life. You guide their hands as they learn to spin wool into thread, the rhythmic hum of the spinning wheel a constant backdrop to their days. You show them how to weave simple fabrics, how to mend torn garments, how to prepare food from the most basic ingredients. They learn to clean, to churn butter, to care for younger children, to manage a household with frugality and efficiency. These are the skills that will make them valuable, either as domestic servants or, if fortune smiles upon them, as wives. The prospect for a girl from the orphanage is most often service in another household. You negotiate with families seeking maids, cooks, or general servants. Again, you scrutinize the terms, the character of the employers. Will she be safe? Will she be respected? Will her wages, however small, be paid? You worry about their vulnerability, about the potential for abuse or exploitation in the homes of strangers. You prepare them for a life where their labor will be constant, their status low, and their independence almost non-existent. Marriage, that distant dream, remains a formidable challenge. A dowry, a financial offering from the bride's family to the groom or his family, is almost always required. Without it, a girl's chances of marrying above the lowest rung of society are incredibly slim. You, as their guardian, become a tireless advocate, attempting to gather these crucial funds. You appeal to wealthy patrons, to charitable guilds, to anyone who might feel moved to contribute to a girl's future. Sometimes, a small dowry can be assembled, enough to secure a marriage to a craftsman or a small farmer, offering a path to stability and a family of her own. These moments are rare, precious victories in a long, often discouraging battle. But for many, marriage will remain an elusive fantasy. They will likely spend their lives in service, moving from one household to another, their existence marked by the routines of labor and the absence of a stable home of their own. You see the wistfulness in their eyes, the quiet longing for a family, for a name they can truly call their own. You comfort them, you encourage them, and you remind them of their inherent worth, independent of any dowry or husband. You impress upon them the importance of piety, of chastity, of honesty. A woman's reputation in medieval society is paramount, and for an orphan, a single misstep can be devastating, erasing any chance of respectability. You teach them resilience, the quiet strength that allows one to endure hardship and maintain dignity. You show them how to find small joys in their work, how to build bonds of friendship, how to nurture the hope within their hearts even when the world seems to offer so little. The institution itself, your orphanage, becomes a complex social machine. You are not merely providing food and shelter. You are preparing young lives for predetermined roles in a rigidly structured world. You are a human resources department of sorts, connecting labor with need, but always with the profound personal investment of a parent. You interview prospective masters and mistresses, you draw up contracts, you follow up on placements when you can. You are their only advocate, their only link to a world that otherwise would have swallowed them whole. The children, both boys and girls, absorb these lessons. They see the distinction in their training, the different expectations placed upon them. They learn their place, not always with joy, but often with a quiet understanding born of necessity. You watch as they leave your care, some with hopeful smiles, others with a palpable fear in their eyes. You send them off with blessings, with a few small coins if you can spare them, and with the enduring wish that they find kindness and opportunity in the world outside your walls. You stand by the gate, watching their figures recede down the cobblestone street. A boy, perhaps, clutching a small satchel, his new master walking briskly ahead. A girl, her hand tucked nervously into the arm of a stern-looking woman. Each step they take carries them further into their gendered destiny, a destiny shaped not by their dreams, but by the immutable social structures of their time. You turn back into the quiet halls of the orphanage, the weight of their futures still heavy on your heart. You know that your work is never truly done, that the battle for each child's future is a continuous, often uphill struggle against the silent, pervasive judgment of a world that so often forgets its most vulnerable. But you continue with that same flickering, fragile lamp of compassion, ready to guide the next wave of silent children towards their own uncertain yet determined paths. You stand in the hushed quiet of the orphanage now, the echoes of departing footsteps still lingering in the air. But your gaze extends beyond these walls, following those children, seeing their journey continue. For many that path leads not to freedom, but to another form of structured existence, the apprenticeship. It is a transition from one kind of wardship to another, a new yoke for their young shoulders. Imagine yourself as one of them, a boy perhaps with a name like Thomas or William. You are 9, maybe 10 years old, small for your age, but with a spirit honed by years of communal living. You are led by a man you barely know, a cooper or a weaver, down a winding cobblestone street. The air is sharper here, filled with the tang of wood smoke and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. This is not the clean, if austere, environment of the orphanage. This is the raw, bustling heart of the medieval town. Your new home is above a workshop or perhaps integrated within it. You smell sawdust or the earthy scent of raw wool, or the metallic tang of an iron forge. The master's house is a cacophony of new sounds. The creak of floorboards, the murmur of conversations you do not yet understand, the clatter of pots from the kitchen where the mistress presides. Your small bundle, perhaps a single tunic and a wooden toy, is all you own. You are shown a corner, a straw pallet on the floor, your new bed in a room shared with other apprentices, older boys who eye you with a mixture of suspicion and knowing pity. Your day begins before the sun truly graces the sky. You are roused from your sleep by a shout or a sharp prod. The air is cold on your skin as you pull on your simple clothes. There is a quick, meager meal of stale bread and thin ale, then straight to work. For a cooper you might start by hauling heavy timbers, learning the different types of wood, the grain, the strength. Your hands, once soft, quickly grow calloused and rough. You learn to listen to the wood, to feel its resistance, to respect its nature. For a weaver, your fingers, though small, are taught the intricate dance of warp and weft. You are nimble enough to mend broken threads, to clean the loom, to prepare the shuttles. The rhythmic clack-clack of the loom becomes the soundtrack of your days, a relentless beat that never truly fades, even in your dreams. You breathe in the fine dust of the fibers, your eyes straining in the dim light. The work is relentless. It is not merely about learning a skill, it is about absolute obedience, about integrating yourself completely into the master's household and his trade. You are an extra pair of hands, an unpaid servant, bound by a contract that typically spans 7 years or more. This is the yoke of the apprentice. You are fed, clothed, and housed, but often barely. Your meals are simple, designed for sustenance, not pleasure. Your clothes are patched and coarse, meant for utility, not comfort. Your bed is hard. Discipline is strict, often harsh. A misstep, a broken tool, a moment of distraction can earn you a cuff across the ear or a blow from a stick. The master and mistress are not your parents. They are your employers and your guardians, but their affection is rarely given freely. Their primary concern is the efficient running of their household and their workshop, and your contribution to it. Loneliness can be a constant companion, especially in the long evenings when the other apprentices might share secrets or stories you are too new or too timid to join. You yearn for the familiar faces of the orphanage, the gentle words of the nuns or the prior. But what of the girls? For them the path often diverges. You might be a girl like Eleanor or Agnes, equally young, equally vulnerable. Your apprenticeship is less likely to be to a specific craft in a guild-regulated workshop. More often you are bound over for domestic service. You become a scullery maid, a laundress, a seamstress, or a nursemaid for the master's own children. Your workshop is the entire house. You rise even earlier, perhaps to light the fires, to fetch water from the well, to sweep the rushes from the floor. Your hands are immersed in cold, greasy water, scrubbing pots and pans until your fingers ache. You learn to launder clothes in harsh lye, to mend torn garments with painstaking stitches, to bake bread in the large hearth. You learn to curtsy, to speak only when spoken to anticipate needs before they are voiced. Your education is in the intricate, unending tasks of running a medieval household. You are taught about herbs and remedies, about preserving food, about managing servants if the household is grand enough. But your work is often invisible, taken for granted, and rarely leads to the independent status of a master craftsman. For you, the hope is not to become a master, but to gain enough experience, and perhaps a small dowry from a benevolent mistress, to make a good marriage. This is your path to security and status. For both boys and girls, the legal document of the apprenticeship contract is a formidable thing. It is a parchment, often sealed, detailing the terms of your service. It binds you for years, a legally recognized commitment of your labor and loyalty. It specifies the master's obligations, to teach the trade, to provide food, lodging, and clothing. And it specifies your obligations, to serve faithfully, to obey, not to waste your master's goods, not to marry without permission. Breaking such a contract carries severe penalties, even imprisonment. You are, in essence, property of the master for the duration of your service. The master's household becomes your entire world. You eat their food, sleep under their roof, live by their rules. You hear their arguments, witness their joys, and feel the sting of their disappointments. You learn not just a trade but the rhythms of a new family, a new community. You observe how transactions are made at market, how goods are sold, how relationships are forged and broken. This is your practical education, far more visceral and immediate than any book learning. 7 years pass or sometimes more. The small, timid child who arrived at the workshop door has transformed. Your hands are strong, your muscles hardened by labor. You know the secrets of your craft, the nuances of your trade. You can heft a barrel, perfectly shape a spindle, or stitch an invisible seam with the practiced ease of long experience. You have learned patience, resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. You have endured hunger, cold, and the sting of injustice. You have survived. But you have also lost something. The carefree innocence of childhood has been traded for the heavy responsibility of labor. Your dreams have been shaped by the tools in your hand, the tasks before you, and the expectations of your master. The silent child of the orphanage has become the silent worker, contributing to the bustling engine of the medieval world, an essential cog in its intricate machinery. The yoke of the apprentice, though heavy, is also the pathway to a future. For the boy, it is the hope of becoming a journeyman, traveling to refine his skills and eventually, if he is talented and fortunate, becoming a master himself, establishing his own workshop, taking on his own apprentices. For the girl, it is the hope of a stable marriage, a household of her own, perhaps even employing her own domestic servants. You reflect on the sheer determination of these young souls. They carry the weight of their past, the legacy of their uncertain beginnings, but they also carry the promise of their own making. The medieval orphanage provided a foundation, a fragile bridge across the abyss of abandonment. The apprenticeship provides the next step, a rigorous forging in the crucible of labor, shaping them into the men and women who will build and maintain the medieval world. Their silence, once a mark of vulnerability, now signifies their quiet strength, their tenacious will to survive and to thrive within the unyielding structures of their age. You have witnessed their journey from ward to workshop, from dependence to the precipice of independent life, bearing the apprentice's yoke with a quiet, enduring fortitude. You have witnessed the quiet, enduring fortitude of the apprentice, forging their own future from the raw materials of their will and the honest sweat of their brow. You have seen them rise from the anonymity of the orphanage to the disciplined ranks of skilled craftspeople, bearing the apprentice's yoke with a quiet, tenacious strength. But now, turn your gaze to a different kind of silence, a different sort of strength, found within the gilded halls and cloistered chambers of medieval power. Here, the orphan's journey takes on a vastly different hue, one less of struggle against abject poverty and more of a subtle, pervasive constraint. This is the realm of the noble orphan, whose life, though often cushioned by wealth, was frequently a carefully constructed paradox, a golden cage. You step across the threshold of a grand castle, its stones cool beneath your hand, far removed from the dusty streets and bustling workshops you have just left. The air here is different, rich with the scent of polished wood, ancient tapestries, and perhaps the faint, lingering aroma of burning incense. Sunlight streams through tall, arched windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the stillness. This is not the communal refuge of a general orphanage, but the private world of the powerful, where a different kind of silent child finds their place, the noble orphan. Who are these children of privilege, yet also of profound loss? They are the sons and daughters of lords and ladies, knights and barons, whose parents met untimely ends through battle, plague, or accident. They are the young heirs whose lineage needed protection and control, often dispossessed of direct command over their vast inheritances until they reached a carefully defined age of majority, or even beyond. They are political pawns, their very existence a matter of strategic importance, often becoming wards of the crown, powerful magnates, or specific religious houses designated for their care. Their guardianship was a coveted position, granting power and influence over their lands, their wealth, and most importantly, their future. Your life, as one of these noble orphans, is a stark contrast to the life of a street orphan or an apprentice. You would never know true hunger, nor the biting cold of inadequate clothing. Your garments are fashioned from fine wool, linen, and sometimes even silk, tailored to your stature and the expectations of your station. Your meals are served in great halls, laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, and rich wines, a far cry from the meager pottage of the common folk. You sleep in a soft bed, perhaps even in your own chamber, attended by servants who ensure your comfort and cater to your needs. This is the gold of your cage, a life of apparent ease and material abundance. But beneath this gleaming surface lies the iron of your confinement. Your existence is not truly your own. Every aspect of your life, from your education to your eventual marriage, is meticulously orchestrated by your powerful guardians. You are a valuable asset, a living embodiment of lineage, wealth, and political alliances. You are not free to choose your path, to follow a personal passion, or even to select your closest companions. Consider your education. For a noble boy, your days are rigorously structured. You would sit for hours with a learned tutor, perhaps a cleric or a seasoned knight, poring over illuminated Latin texts, mastering the intricacies of courtly etiquette, or learning the brutal elegance of a sword fight in the castle's practice yard. You are taught the arts of chivalry, hunting, and horsemanship. You learn to administer vast estates, to understand the complex web of feudal law, and to command men in battle. Your instruction is not merely academic. It is a practical training for leadership, for military roles, and for the weighty responsibilities of your future station. Your body is honed, your mind sharpened, all in preparation for a role you did not choose, but are expected to embody with unwavering conviction. For a noble girl, your upbringing is equally demanding, though focused on different skills. Your hands are trained in the delicate precision of embroidery, creating intricate patterns that signify your refinement and status. You learn to play the lute or harp, to sing, and to speak one or more foreign languages, demonstrating your cultured sensibility. You are educated in the complex accounts of a vast estate, the intricacies of household management, and the proper decorum for receiving guests of high rank. Your tutors might instruct you in history, religion, and the proper comportment for a lady of your class. Every lesson, every skill, is designed not for personal fulfillment, but to prepare you for a strategic marriage, an alliance that will bolster your family's power or solidify political ties. You are being groomed to manage a grand household, to raise future heirs, and to be a gracious, intelligent, and influential consort. The paradox deepens as you realize the extent of your powerlessness. You possess the trappings of status but little actual agency. Your lands, your titles, your very hand in marriage are all subject to the machinations of others. Your guardians hold your inheritance in trust, often managing it for their own benefit, or delaying your access to it far beyond what is customary. You are a pawn on the chessboard of medieval politics, to be moved and traded as circumstances dictate. Your marriage, the most significant event in your adult life, is a contract negotiated between powerful families, often without your input or consent. Love, if it comes at all, is a secondary consideration. The silence of the noble orphan is not the silence of hunger, nor the silence of desperate striving for survival. It is the silence of restraint, of political expediency, and of social expectation. It is the quiet ache of knowing your future is not your own, woven into the tapestries of political ambition and familial obligation. You learn to mask your true feelings, to present a composed and obedient demeanor, for any display of defiance or personal desire could jeopardize your already precarious position. You might find solace in books, in music, or in quiet contemplation, but true self-determination remains a distant dream. You move through echoing halls, surrounded by the rustling silks of attendants and the clinking of armor from passing guards. You hear the hushed whispers of intrigue, the distant baying of hounds, the steady rhythm of lessons being taught in other chambers. Yet you are often profoundly alone. Your companions are often other wards or young nobles being fostered in the same household, all learning to navigate this intricate dance of power and decorum. While you share a common fate, a deep personal connection can be difficult to forge in an environment where everyone is, to some extent, a player in a larger game. The emotional toll is subtle but pervasive. The hollow comfort of a life where every luxury comes with an unseen chain. The constant awareness that your identity is not simply who you are, but who you are expected to be. You are an object of speculation, an investment to be protected and yielded for maximum return. This silent burden shapes you profoundly, fostering a quiet resilience, a cunning intelligence, and an ability to read the subtle currents of power that flow through your privileged prison. Your fortitude, like that of the common apprentice, is enduring. But it is a different kind of endurance. It is the strength to perform your assigned role flawlessly, to navigate a world of smiles and daggers, to maintain your dignity even when your destiny is controlled by others. While the common orphan fought for a place, the noble orphan often struggled within a predetermined, yet comfortable, prison. Their silence is a testament to this unique form of survival, a quiet acceptance, a strategic performance, and often, a profound internal solitude, hidden behind a facade of privilege and power. You have witnessed these golden cages and the silent, resilient souls who learn to live within their shimmering, unyielding bars. You have seen the gilded cages, the silent, resilient souls living within their shimmering, unyielding bars. You have witnessed the carefully constructed lives of those born into privilege, their destinies predetermined, their suffering often a quiet, internal struggle for agency within a world designed to control them. Their silence spoke of strategic performance, of inherited burdens, of a lonely battle for self in a role defined by others. But now, you step away from the polished stone and the whispering corridors of power. You walk a different path, through narrower, muddier streets, past the clamor of the marketplace and the stench of refuse, towards a different kind of silence, a silence born not of strategic performance, but of raw, absolute desperation. You approach a sturdy, imposing building. It might be a large hospital, a bustling convent, or a dedicated orphanage, known colloquially as a foundling home. The air here feels heavy, not with the weight of expectation, but with the silent echoes of countless desperate farewells. You stop before a specific feature, built into the thick stone wall at about waist height. It is a wooden cylinder, perhaps 2 feet in diameter, set horizontally into the masonry, like a small, revolving barrel. This is the turning basket, the rota, the foundling wheel. It is simple, stark, and utterly devoid of comfort. The wood is worn smooth in places by countless turns, by the frantic touch of hands, by the rubbing of tiny bundles. On the outside it is a hollow, inanimate object. But you know its true function. It is a silent confessor, a gate to an unknown future, a final, agonizing choice for those who have no other. Imagine the chill of the night air clinging to your cloak as you stand here, an invisible observer. Perhaps a thin fog rolls in from the river, muffling the distant sounds of the city, isolating this one stark moment in time. The only light might be the pale glow of the moon, or a flickering lamp from a nearby window, casting long, wavering shadows. You see her, a woman cloaked and hooded, her face obscured, her shoulders hunched. She moves with a hesitant urgency, her steps uneven, her heart surely pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. In her arms, a bundle, small and fragile, swaddled tightly against the cold. Her reasons are legion, and each one a knife twist in her soul. Perhaps she is an unmarried servant, dismissed and disgraced, with no family to turn to, no means of supporting a child born out of wedlock. Perhaps her husband has died, leaving her destitute with too many mouths to feed, and this new baby, another hungry cry, pushes her beyond the brink of survival. Maybe she is fleeing an abusive home or the ravages of famine, or the terror of a plague, and believes this place, however bleak, offers a slim chance of life for her infant, a chance she herself cannot provide. The sin of infanticide, though tragically common, carries the harshest spiritual and legal penalties. The turning basket offers a desperate reprieve from that terrible choice, a way to give life, even if it means severing the most fundamental bond. You watch her approach the wheel. Her hands tremble as she fumbles with the latch, or perhaps she simply pushes against the wooden cylinder. It rotates, slowly, with a low, mournful creak that seems to carry the weight of all the sorrow it has witnessed. The inside of the basket is dark, cold, a void waiting to receive. She hesitates, a breath held for an eternity, her gaze lingering on the tiny face within the bundle. You cannot hear her thoughts, but you can feel the wrenching despair, the profound, unutterable grief of this moment. This is not casual abandonment. This is a mother tearing a piece of her very being away, offering it to the cold mercy of the unknown. With a final, agonizing resolve, she places the swaddled infant gently into the basket. The small form disappears into the darkness of the wooden cylinder. Then her hand reaches for a rope or a chain, barely visible in the dim light. She pulls it, and a bell tolls, a small, clear chime that pierces the quiet of the night. It is the signal. It is the sound that announces a new arrival, a new mouth to feed, a new life cast upon the institution's mercy. As the bell's faint echo fades, she gives the wheel a final push, turning it inwards, away from the street, away from her. The heavy wood creaks again, sealing the infant within the walls. Then she turns and flees, melting back into the shadows from which she came, leaving behind only the cold, still air and the profound, silent emptiness of her arms. Inside, roused by the bell, a nun, a lay nurse, or an attendant hurries to the other side of the wall. She opens the inner door of the turning basket, and there, nestled in the hollow, is the tiny, silent bundle. The process is routine yet never truly routine. Each chime of the bell represents a human tragedy, a life delivered into their care. The infant is typically examined, perhaps given a brief blessing, and then stripped of any identifying marks or clothing that might betray its origins. This is crucial for maintaining the anonymity the turning basket was designed to provide. The child is usually given a generic name, often reflecting the saint's day on which it was found, or a name associated with the institution itself. For example, a child found on St. John's Day might be named Giovanni. A child found at a hospital dedicated to the Holy Spirit might be given a name like Spirito or Spiritus. The precise date of arrival, and perhaps a unique mark or inscription if one was found on the infant or its swaddling, would be recorded in a register. But all traces of its parents, its true family, its heritage, are purposefully erased. This child, once bearing the faint whisper of a family name, now carries only the mark of the anonymous foundling. The life that awaits these children within the foundling home is one of extreme hardship. These institutions, however well-intentioned, were often overwhelmed. Resources were perpetually scarce. What nurses hired to breastfeed the infants were often overworked and underpaid, sometimes struggling to feed their own children. Disease spread like wildfire in the crowded, often unsanitary conditions. The mortality rates among foundlings were astronomically high. It was not uncommon for 70%, even 90% of children admitted to a foundling home to die within their first year of life. For many, the turning basket was not a gateway to survival, but a prelude to a quick, quiet death. Those who did survive faced a future of servitude, of manual labor, of life on the fringes of society. They were often viewed with suspicion, their unknown parentage making them social outsiders. They learned early to be self-reliant, to trust few and to endure. Their education, if any, was rudimentary, focused on practical skills that would make them useful laborers or servants. They carried no family name, no inherited land, no social standing. Their lives were a testament to the brutal realities of poverty and social stigma in the medieval world. The turning basket, then, is more than just a mechanism. It is a profound symbol. It represents a desperate attempt at mercy in an unforgiving age. It embodies the societal pressures that forced mothers to make unimaginable choices. It is a monument to the thousands upon thousands of children whose lives began in anonymity, their cries absorbed by the cold stone walls of an institution, their parentage forever erased by the silent turn of a wooden wheel. You reflect on the contrast. You have witnessed the noble orphan, trapped by lineage and expectation, their voice silenced by the weight of their name. And now you witness the foundling, their voice silenced by the absence of a name, by the complete erasure of their origin. Both are orphans, both live in a particular kind of silence. But the silence of the foundling is far deeper, more absolute. It is the silence of a life begun without a history, without a connection, without even the echo of a forgotten love. They are the truly silent children, their beginnings a blank page in the vast, unforgiving chronicle of the medieval world. Their survival, against such overwhelming odds, is a testament not to privilege or strategic performance, but to sheer, unyielding, anonymous will. You stand here by the cold stone wall, the lingering chill of desperation settling around you, understanding the immense human cost of such a simple, brutal device. You step away from the cold stone of the foundling wheel, the image of those tiny, abandoned lives lingering in your mind. The silence of their beginnings, the absolute void where a family name should be, is a profound weight. But the story of these silent children does not end at the wheel. For a rare few, their existence, however anonymous, was carefully noted. You must now follow their faint trail, not through the bustling streets or the quiet cloisters, but into the hushed, dust-filled chambers where lives were distilled into ink on parchment. You enter the archive. Imagine a room, perhaps a dim corner of a monastery library, or a civic scribe's office. The air is thick with the scent of aged paper, beeswax, and damp stone. Heavy wooden shelves line the walls, groaning under the weight of bound volumes. Sunlight, if any, filters weakly through a high, leaded window, illuminating dancing motes of dust in the air. This is not a place of grand pronouncements or dramatic events. It is a realm of meticulous, often tedious, record-keeping. You approach a sturdy oak table, scarred by centuries of use. On it lies a formidable book. This is a ledger, a register, a chronicle of the orphanage's intake and expenditure. Its covers are thick, perhaps leather-bound or encased in heavy wooden boards. The pages, made of durable parchment or vellum, are yellowed with age, their edges softened by countless turnings. You run your hand over the rough texture, imagining the many hands that have touched it before yours, the scribes, the administrators, perhaps even a curious noble overseeing the charity. The scribe, a figure often overlooked, sits hunched over the ledger. His quill scratches rhythmically across the page, a faint sound that once marked the official entry of a new life into the institution. He is not concerned with the child's hopes or fears, their potential or their pain. His task is to record facts, the date of admission, the approximate age, sometimes a brief description of the infant's swaddling clothes, or any token left with them. You lean closer, trying to decipher the elegant, yet often challenging, script. Here, on these lines, the foundling's journey into official existence begins. But what an existence it is! You search for names, for familial connections, for any hint of identity. And you find almost none. These are not entries like those for the noble orphans you have already encountered, where every lineage, every alliance, every potential inheritance was meticulously detailed. Here, in the foundling's ledger, the absence of identity is the defining characteristic. Look at this entry, for example. It reads, "Item received on the 3rd day of March in the year of our Lord 1349, an infant male child, estimated to be 4 days old, wrapped in a coarse linen cloth, with a small silver cross tied around his neck. No other mark or sign. That is all. No name. No parents. No place of origin beyond received. The child is an item, a piece of inventory, an object of charity to be accounted for. The silver cross is the only whisper of a possible past, a silent plea perhaps, or a desperate hope for divine protection." You see entry after entry, repeating this pattern of stark anonymity. Infant female, found wrapped in a red wool blanket, with a small lead bird in her hand. Child of unknown sex, approximately 1 week old, discovered by the city gate, wearing a cap of faded blue. The descriptions are functional, intended to differentiate one nameless infant from another, to provide a crude identifier for administrative purposes, should anyone ever inquire. But no one ever does, not for their birth parents anyway. The ledger is a book of echoes, but the echoes are faint, distorted by the passage of time and the bureaucratic lens through which these lives were viewed. It is a record of intake, of provisioning, of expenses. It tells you how much flour was purchased, how many nurses were hired, how many shrouds were required. But it tells you little of the human spirit contained within these brief, clinical entries. Consider the human cost of such meticulous anonymity. For the noble orphan, their name was a burden, a chain. But for the foundling, the absence of a name was a different kind of prison, a fundamental denial of self. You are defined by your lineage, by your family, by your given name. These children had none of it. They were blanks, ciphers in a society that valued connection above all else. Their entry into the world was a bureaucratic transaction, their identity a space left empty in a ledger. Occasionally you might find a later entry beside a foundling's initial record, indicating a name given by the orphanage. Perhaps John Foundling, or Mary of the Gate. These names, often generic or derived from their circumstances of discovery, are not a restoration of identity, but rather an administrative convenience, a label applied by the institution. They speak to the child's status as a recipient of charity, rather than as a person with inherent worth and a unique story. The ledger also serves as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of medieval childhood. After the initial entry, subsequent notes might detail a child's placement with a wet nurse in the countryside, the payments made for their care, or their eventual apprenticeship to a local craftsperson. Many entries, however, simply end. No further mention. This silence is deafening. It speaks of the high mortality rates among infants and young children, especially foundlings, who often arrived already weakened by exposure and neglect. A final, brief entry might read, "Died, aged 1 year, buried in the common ground." Another life, begun in silence, ended in the same. You turn the pages, the faint rustle a mournful sound. Each line represents a life, a human being who experienced hunger, cold, perhaps moments of warmth and kindness from a nurse, but whose official existence was reduced to a few dry facts. What did they dream of? What were their first words? What did their laughter sound like? The ledger offers no answers. It is a record of their institutional survival, not their personal journey. For those rare individuals who survived into adulthood, carrying the stigma of their unknown origins, these ledgers offered no solace, no path to their past. To trace one's parentage was an almost impossible quest, especially when the only clue was a vague description of swaddling clothes or a small lost token. Imagine the burden of living without roots, without knowing who you truly were, defined only by your abandonment. The ledger, rather than preserving identity, effectively erased it, consigning these children to a permanent state of unknowing. As you stand here, surrounded by these silent chronicles, you feel the weight of centuries of forgotten lives. These ledgers are not just dusty old books. They are monuments to anonymity, to the societal structures that dictated who mattered and who did not. The foundlings, those items in the register, represent the furthest extreme of medieval vulnerability. Their silence, unlike the performative silence of the noble orphan, was not chosen. It was imposed, woven into the very fabric of their documented existence. The archive, with its ordered rows and precise entries, often promises to reveal the past. But here, for the silent children of the orphanages, it reveals a profound absence. It tells us how the institution functioned, how resources were allocated, how society attempted to manage the inconvenient truth of abandoned infants. But it largely fails to tell us about the children themselves. Their voices remain unheard, their faces unseen, their individual stories swallowed by the cold, impartial hand of the medieval scribe, lost to the ledger, forever anonymous. This profound silence is the loudest testimony these children could ever leave behind. Yet even in this profound silence, we are compelled to listen. You are drawn closer, leaning into the quiet hum of history, searching for echoes where names fade and faces blur. The archive, as we have seen, offers us ledgers, not lives. It provides numbers, not narratives. But what if you read between the lines? What if you allow the very structure of their absence to speak to you, to guide your imagination into the cold stone walls and echoing courtyards where these children spent their fleeting, unrecorded days? To understand these silent children, you must first understand the institutions that house them. Imagine standing at the threshold of a medieval foundling hospital, perhaps the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, or the Hôtel Dieu in Paris. The records, meticulously kept by monks or clerks, tell you about the institution's finances, its benefactors, its rules. They list the supplies purchased, the number of beds, the names of wet nurses. They document the intake of new items, sometimes described merely as a child, an infant, found at the gate. Sometimes you might find a small detail, a scrap of cloth, a coin, a charm left with the child, a desperate, final gesture from a parent hoping for recognition, or perhaps just for a blessing for a future they could not provide. You quickly learn that poverty was an overwhelming force. Famine, plague, war, these left countless families unable to feed another mouth. But you also uncover the stark reality of illegitimacy. A child born out of wedlock often carried an insurmountable social burden, threatening the honor and reputation of families, particularly women. For a single mother, without a husband or family support, abandonment was not a choice but a desperate act of survival, a last hope that the child might thrive where she could not. You see the gates of the orphanage, often designed with a turning cradle or a small opening, allowing parents to relinquish their infant anonymously, often in the dead of night. Picture the cold weight of the child in their arms, the final kiss, the swift turning of the mechanism, the hurried steps away, leaving behind a profound emptiness. This anonymity, while protecting the parents, further stripped the child of any personal history, any lineage that could be traced. Inside, the infants faced overwhelming odds. Mortality rates in medieval orphanages were tragically high. Disease spread easily in crowded conditions. Poor nutrition, even with the best intentions, was a constant threat. You hear the cries, the hushed movements of the nurses, the constant struggle to keep tiny lives flickering. Wet nurses, often mothers who had lost their own babies or needed the income, were vital. Their milk was life itself. You can almost smell the milk, the linen, the faint scent of sickness that hung in the air. The sounds would be a cacophony of small, fragile existences, hungry wails, soft cooing, the rhythmic creak of rockers. the murmured prayers of the women dedicated to their care. Yet, for all this sensory detail, the individuality of these newborns remains obscured, a collective vulnerable mass within the institution's walls. If a child survived infancy, their world expanded, though still confined. You might see them learning rudimentary skills, spinning, weaving, simple chores. Education, if offered, was often basic, perhaps a few prayers, a smattering of reading for boys destined for clerical life. Girls might learn household duties, preparing them for domestic service. Play, that essential human activity, would have been present, but perhaps muted, overshadowed by the constant demands of the institution, by the unspoken knowledge of their origins. Imagine small hands meticulously stitching fabric or scrubbing pots, or bare feet chasing shadows in a sparse courtyard. Their days would be governed by routine, by the rhythm of the institution, a stark contrast to the chaotic, often dangerous world outside its protective walls. You witness the solemnity of their meals, the quiet focus of their tasks, the brief moments of shared camaraderie. Life was structured, disciplined. You imagine the bells marking the hours for prayer, for meals, for work. Discipline, sometimes harsh, would have been part of their daily routine, aimed at shaping them into compliant, useful members of society, capable of earning their keep once they left the institution. The caregivers, often members of religious orders, nuns, monks, or lay confraternities, acted as their surrogate parents, providing not just sustenance but also moral instruction. You see a nun patiently teaching a child to recite the Pater Noster, or a lay brother showing a group of older boys how to mend fishing nets. These interactions, while often practical, would have formed the bedrock of their emotional world, shaping their understanding of compassion and community. Their connection to these figures, however fleeting, would have been some of the most profound human contact they knew. For boys, apprenticeship was a common path. They would be bound to a master, a baker, a carpenter, a weaver, in exchange for training, food, and lodging. You can almost feel the rough texture of the tools, smell the sawdust or the baking bread. Their names might reappear in apprenticeship contracts, small islands of identity in a sea of anonymity. Imagine a young boy, perhaps 10 or 12 years old, with eyes wide with apprehension and a hint of excitement, being led out of the orphanage gates, carrying a small bundle of his few possessions, towards an unknown future. His new life would be one of hard labor, early mornings, and strict obedience, but also the chance for a trade, a livelihood, a place in the world. For girls, domestic service was the most likely future. You picture them scrubbing floors, tending fires, assisting in the kitchens of wealthier households, their lives continuing under the shadow of others. Their names, too, might occasionally surface in household inventories or wills, revealing their presence, if not their personhood, within the domestic sphere. Some might enter religious orders, especially boys who showed scholarly aptitude. The cloister offered a different kind of anonymity, a spiritual identity replacing the lack of a familial one. You can almost hear the Gregorian chant, the rustle of robes, the quiet turning of pages in a scriptorium. For these few, a life of contemplation or service provided a different kind of refuge, a different path to meaning. Tragically, many would not reach adulthood. The churchyards surrounding these institutions would hold countless unmarked graves, tiny resting places for lives barely lived, their stories ending before they truly began. You walk among the silent stones, feeling the weight of these lost generations. The sheer volume of infant burials testifies to the harsh realities of medieval childhood, a grim counterpoint to the vibrant tapestry of art and architecture of the era. These were lives cut short by disease, by malnutrition, by the fragility of existence in a world without modern medicine. Their passing, often recorded simply as infans mortis, dead infant, underscores the absence of individual grief, subsumed by the institutional cycle of life and death. You must allow yourself to imagine the internal world of these children. What did they dream of? What fears haunted them? Did they wonder about the parents who left them? Did they form bonds with other children, with the nurses, with the monks or nuns who oversaw their care. Their resilience, their capacity for joy and sorrow, their small acts of defiance or kindness. These are the human elements that the ledgers cannot capture, but which you as a listener can bring to life through empathy. Imagine a small boy sharing a crust of bread with a younger child, a fleeting act of generosity. Picture a group of girls whispering secrets in the dormitory after lights out, finding comfort in shared vulnerability. You can almost see their faces, etched with the innocence of childhood, yet also touched by an early understanding of hardship. They were not merely numbers, they were living, breathing individuals with hopes, fears, and nascent personalities. Though we may never know their names, their spirits echo through the silent halls, a testament to the universal human experience of seeking connection and meaning, even in the most challenging circumstances. Despite our efforts, the individual you of these children often remains elusive. We can paint a picture of their collective experience, understand the societal forces that shape their fates. We can see the medieval world through their eyes, a world of charity and cruelty, of piety and pragmatism, where human life, especially vulnerable life, was both valued and disposable. Their collective story serves as a powerful reminder of those who were consistently pushed to the margins, whose existence was acknowledged, but whose individuality was denied. Their silence, paradoxically, speaks volumes about the priorities of the time. It highlights the structures of power, the economics of survival, and the profound human impact of societal norms. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that history, often written by the powerful, largely omits the experiences of the powerless. But by consciously seeking out their echoes, by listening to the silence itself, you honor their memory and give voice to those who were once utterly voiceless. You feel the weight of their forgotten histories, a quiet but insistent presence in the tapestry of the past, urging us to remember that even the most anonymous lives hold profound significance. Their story reminds us that beneath the grand narratives of kings and battles, countless smaller, personal struggles shape the very fabric of human existence. Segment 12. Unwritten Lives, piecing together their histories. Yet even in this profound silence we are compelled to listen. You are drawn closer, leaning into the quiet hum of history, searching for echoes where names fade and faces blur. The archive, as we have seen, offers us ledgers, not lives. It provides numbers, not narratives. But what if you read between the lines? What if you allow the very structure of their absence to speak to you, to guide your imagination into the cold stone walls and echoing courtyards where these children spent their fleeting, unrecorded days? To understand these silent children, you must first understand the institutions that house them. Imagine standing at the threshold of a medieval foundling hospital, perhaps the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, or the Hôtel Dieu in Paris. The records, meticulously kept by monks or clerks, tell you about the institution's finances, its benefactors, its rules. They list the supplies purchased, the number of beds, the names of wet nurses. They document the intake of new items, sometimes described merely as a child, an infant, found at the gate. Sometimes you might find a small detail, a scrap of cloth, a coin, a charm left with the child, a desperate final gesture from a parent hoping for recognition, or perhaps just for a blessing for a future they could not provide. You quickly learn that poverty was an overwhelming force. Famine, plague, war, these left countless families unable to feed another mouth. But you also uncover the stark reality of illegitimacy. A child born out of wedlock often carried an insurmountable social burden, threatening the honor and reputation of families, particularly women. For a single mother, without a husband or family support, abandonment was not a choice but a desperate act of survival, a last hope that the child might thrive where she could not. You see the gates of the orphanage, often designed with a turning cradle or a small opening, allowing parents to relinquish their infant anonymously, often in the dead of night. Picture the cold weight of the child in their arms, the final kiss, the swift turning of the mechanism, the hurried steps away, leaving behind a profound emptiness. This anonymity, while protecting the parents, further stripped the child of any personal history, any lineage that could be traced. Imagine a city without its labor. Imagine the workshops stilled, the fields untended, the kitchens cold. This is the gap that would have existed without the silent children. You see them now, in your mind's eye, a stream of young people emerging from the orphanage gates, ready to contribute. They became the apprentices learning the intricate skills of the weaver, the potter, the cobbler. You can almost feel the smooth clay beneath their small, developing hands, or smell the rich scent of leather as they learn to cut and stitch. They toiled in the fields, their bodies growing strong under the sun, helping to bring in the harvest that fed the growing towns. They served in manor houses and urban homes, their quiet industry ensuring the smooth running of households, from sweeping floors to tending fires, from fetching water to assisting with the preparation of meals. Their labor, though often humble, was indispensable. It was the backbone of local economies, providing the workforce that allowed craft and commerce to flourish. Without this constant influx of young, often desperate, and therefore willing hands, the gears of medieval life would have ground to a halt. Their existence also profoundly shaped the nascent social welfare systems of the Middle Ages. Think of the very institutions that housed them. The orphanages themselves, often founded and sustained by religious orders or wealthy benefactors, were pioneering examples of organized charity. Their presence spurred cities and the church to develop structures of care that extended beyond the immediate family. You might walk past the remnants of an old hospital or almshouse and realize that these institutions, born from a spiritual imperative to care for the vulnerable, were often inextricably linked to the care of abandoned children. This gave rise to a broader understanding of communal responsibility, a realization that the welfare of the city's most vulnerable members was a shared concern, not just a private burden. It was a step, however small and imperfect, towards a more organized approach to poverty and social need, laying some of the very earliest groundwork for what we might now recognize as social services. Consider the moral landscape they helped to shape. The sight of an abandoned infant, the recognition of childhood vulnerability, fostered a deep theological and ethical reflection within medieval society. You can almost hear the sermons from the pulpit, urging compassion, emphasizing the Christian duty to protect the innocent. This wasn't merely abstract theology, it translated into tangible action. The founding of more orphanages, the collection of alms, the dedication of lives to the care of these children. Even if the motivations were complex, a blend of genuine charity and social control, the undeniable outcome was the institutionalization of care. This collective response to human needs solidified a moral understanding that children, regardless of their parentage or station, possessed intrinsic value and deserved protection. It was a silent testament to the enduring human capacity for empathy, even in a harsh world. Their legacy is also imprinted on the demographic shifts and stability of medieval communities. While mortality rates for children, especially infants, were tragically high, the sheer volume of children passing through orphanages meant that those who survived contributed significantly to the population base. They filled gaps left by plague, famine, and warfare, ensuring a continuity of generations. You might trace a family line back through fragmented records and discover an ancestor who began life in an orphanage, a testament to their resilience and their ability to integrate and thrive, forming new families and contributing to the community's social fabric. Their stories, though largely unwritten, are embedded in the very DNA of those who came after them. Even the silence itself is a powerful part of their legacy. It speaks volumes about who held power, whose stories were deemed worthy of preservation. The fact that we must actively search for their presence, that we must piece together fragments from ledgers, inventories, and architectural remains, is a profound statement about the nature of history itself. It compels you, the listener, to question whose voices are amplified and whose are muted. It challenges you to look beyond the grand narratives of kings and conquerors and to find the humanity in the lives of the everyday, the anonymous, the forgotten. This silent legacy reminds us that history is not just about the celebrated few, but about the countless millions whose quiet lives created the bedrock upon which civilizations are built. Their impact echoes through the centuries to our own time. When you consider modern debates about child welfare, about the rights of vulnerable children, about the responsibilities of society towards those without family, you are, in a very real sense, hearing the faint echoes of medieval orphanages. The questions they posed, the challenges they presented, the solutions they attempted, however rudimentary, laid foundational stones for many of our contemporary discussions. The very concept of institutions designed to protect and nurture children in distress has its roots deep in this medieval soil. You see this today in children's homes, in foster care systems, in the ongoing work of charities dedicated to youth. The issues have evolved, the methods have changed, but the fundamental human need and the societal response to it remain strikingly similar. So, when you next encounter an ancient church, a crumbling city wall, or a path worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, pause for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine. Feel the cool air, hear the faint whispers of a distant past. Recognize that within these very spaces, the silent children of medieval orphanages lived, learned, worked, and eventually emerged, leaving an indelible, if often unacknowledged, mark. Their legacy is not just one of survival but one of foundational contribution. It is a testament to the quiet power of countless individual lives converging to shape the course of history, reminding us that even the most unassuming among us possess the capacity for extraordinary, lasting influence. Their silent footsteps have truly resounded through the ages, if only you listen with an open heart and an attentive mind.